Daily Words of God. Man's nature is quite different from my essence, for man's corrupt nature originates entirely from Satan. Man's nature has been processed and corrupted by Satan. That is, man lives under the influence of its evil and ugliness. Man does not grow in a world of truth or a holy environment, and still less does man live in the light. Therefore, it is not possible for anyone to possess truth within their nature from the moment of birth, and less can anyone be born with an essence that fears and obeys God. On the contrary, people are possessed of a nature that resists God, disobeys God, and has no love for the truth. This nature is the problem I want to discuss: betrayal. Betrayal is the source of each person's resistance to God. This is a problem that exists only in man and not in me. Some will ask, since all men live in the world just as Christ does, why is it that all men have natures that betray God, yet Christ does not? This is a problem that must be explained clearly to you. The basis of mankind's existence is repeated reincarnation of the soul. In other words, every person gains a human life in the flesh when their soul is reincarnated. After a person's body is born, its life continues until the flesh ultimately reaches its limits, which is the final moment when the soul leaves its shell. This process repeats again and again, with a person's soul coming and going time after time, and thus the existence of mankind is maintained. The life of flesh is also the life of man's soul, and man's soul supports the existence of man's flesh. That is to say, each person's life comes from their soul, and life is not inherent to the flesh. Thus, man's nature comes from the soul, not from the flesh. Only the soul of each person knows how they have experienced Satan's temptations, affliction, and corruption. These things are unknowable to the flesh of man. Therefore, mankind unwittingly becomes ever darker, ever filthier, and ever more evil, while the distance between man and myself grows ever greater, and life becomes ever darker for mankind. Satan holds the souls of mankind in its grasp, and so, of course, has man's flesh been occupied by Satan. How could such flesh and such a mankind not resist God? How could they be innately compatible with him? The reason I cast Satan down into midair is because it betrayed me. How could humans, then, be free of their involvement? This is why betrayal is human nature. I trust that once you understand this reasoning, you should also have belief in the essence of Christ. The flesh worn by the Spirit of God is God's own flesh. The Spirit of God is supreme. He is almighty, holy, and righteous. Likewise, his flesh is also supreme, almighty, holy, and righteous. Such a flesh can only do that which is righteous and beneficial to mankind, that which is holy, glorious, and mighty. He is incapable of doing anything that violates the truth, that violates morality and justice, and much less is he capable of anything that would betray God's Spirit. The Spirit of God is holy, and thus his flesh is incorruptible by Satan. His flesh is of a different essence than the flesh of man. For it is man, not God, who is corrupted by Satan. Satan could not possibly corrupt the flesh of God. Thus, despite the fact that man and Christ dwell within the same space, it is only man who is possessed, used, and entrapped by Satan. By contrast, Christ is eternally impervious to Satan's corruption, because Satan will never be capable of ascending to the highest place, and will never be able to draw near to God. Today, you should all understand that it is only mankind, corrupted as it is by Satan, that betrays me. Betrayal will never be an issue that involves Christ in the least.
God's Spirit wears is his own, just as his Spirit is supreme, almighty, holy, and righteous. So is the flesh of God himself. This flesh can do just what is righteous, benefits man. What's holy, glorious, and mighty, not what violates truth, justice, morality, or what betrays God's Spirit. God's Spirit is holy, so his flesh can't be corrupted. His flesh's essence is different from that of man. The flesh, God's Spirit, wears is his own, just as his Spirit is supreme, almighty, holy, and righteous. So is the flesh of God himself. Satan can corrupt man, but never God's own flesh. So though man and Christ share the same space, only man is dominated, used and trapped by Satan, while Christ is free from its corruption. For Satan can ascend to the place of the Most High, and will never be able to draw near to God. The flesh, God's Spirit, wears is his own, just as his Spirit is supreme, almighty, holy, and righteous. So is the flesh of God himself. So is the flesh of God himself.